Alfredo Stroessner Maciarauda was the dictator of Paraguay for an unprecedented 35 years, from 1954 to 1989, making him the longest-serving ruler in modern South American history. His regime was characterized by authoritarianism, strict control over state institutions, systematic repression of political opposition, and a close alliance with the Colorado Party, which played a central role in consolidating his power. Stroessner became a symbol of 20th-century Latin American authoritarianism, and his legacy remains a subject of debate and controversy in Paraguay and the region. Rise to power. Stroessner was born on November 3, 1912, in Encarnación, Paraguay, into a family of German and Swiss immigrants. From a young age, he pursued a military career, entering the Paraguayan Military Academy in 1932. His active participation in the Chaco War, 1932 to 1935, a conflict between Paraguay and Bolivia, earned him recognition and prestige within the armed forces. This military standing was crucial for his political rise, as the Paraguayan army became a decisive actor in national politics in the decades that followed. In 1954, Stroessner seized power through a coup that ousted President Federico Chávez. The coup was facilitated by his ability to mobilize sectors of the military and forge alliances within the Colorado Party, which dominated Paraguayan politics at the time. Stroessner quickly presented himself as a leader who would provide stability and order in a country marked by political instability and corruption, consolidating his authority rapidly. Authoritarian regime. Stroessner's government was characterized by centralized power and the suppression of any political opposition. From the start, he implemented a system of censorship, political persecution, and constant surveillance of citizens. The secret police, known as the Directorate of Investigations of the National Police, played a key role in repressing activists, union leaders, political opponents, and members of rival parties. Thousands were arbitrarily detained, tortured, or disappeared, making Paraguay one of the most extreme examples of authoritarianism in the region. Stroessner also used the state apparatus to consolidate control over the economy and strategic resources. Corruption and clientelism were widespread, with public officials and business elites benefiting from state contracts and concessions in exchange for political loyalty. This structure enabled the Colorado Party to maintain hegemony for decades, ensuring Stroessner's long tenure in power. Foreign policy and international relations. During his rule, Stroessner maintained pragmatic relations with other South American dictatorships of the era, such as Augusto Pinochet in Chile and Jorge Rafael Videla in Argentina, as well as with the United States. The Cold War played a significant role in these relations, as the Paraguayan regime positioned itself as a strategic ally against the spread of communism in the region. The U.S., in particular, provided political and military support to Stroessner, viewing his government as a bulwark against Soviet influence in Latin America. At the same time, Paraguay under Stroessner remained relatively isolated in terms of economic and social development. Infrastructure and modernization projects were limited, and much of the country's population continued to live in poverty and marginalization, especially in rural areas. The lack of economic diversification and dependence on sectors such as agriculture and livestock hindered Paraguay's integration into the regional economy. Political control and power consolidation. One of the most remarkable aspects of Stroessner's regime was his ability to remain in power for over 3 decades. He established institutional mechanisms that ensured his repeated re-election and the dominance of the Colorado Party. Elections were systematically manipulated through electoral fraud, intimidation of opponents, and media control. This strategy not only eliminated political competition but also reinforced the perception that Stroessner was indispensable for national stability. Furthermore, Stroessner cultivated a network of personal loyalties within the military and civil administration. Senior military officers and key government officials were chosen based on their loyalty, ensuring that any attempt to overthrow him would be quickly neutralized. This vertical political control created an authoritarian system that withstood internal crises and external pressures for decades. Economic and social aspects. Economically, Stroessner's policies focused more on maintaining power than achieving sustainable development. While some infrastructure projects, such as dams and roads, were implemented, much of the wealth generated benefited elites connected to the regime. Social inequality and poverty persisted, particularly in rural areas where the majority of the population relied on subsistence farming. Despite these limitations, Stroessner achieved a certain level of macroeconomic stability that reinforced the perception of order and control. However, this stability was largely based on political repression and the curtailment of civil rights, creating an environment of fear and compliance among the population. Fall of the regime and legacy. Stroessner's regime began to weaken in the late 1980s due to both internal and external factors. International pressure for respect of human rights, conflicts within the Colorado Party, and growing civil resistance made his continued rule unsustainable. In 1989, Stroessner was overthrown in a military coup led by General Andrés Rodriguez, ending his prolonged dictatorship. Stroessner's legacy is widely debated. On one hand, his regime left Paraguay with weakened political institutions and a history of severe human rights abuses. Repression, torture, and forced disappearances left deep scars on the nation's collective memory. On the other hand, some sectors point to political stability and institutional control as a notable feature of his rule, although these achievements came at the expense of freedom and social justice. Conclusion: Alfredo Stroessner represents one of the clearest examples of prolonged dictatorship in Latin America. His ability to remain in power for 35 years was based on complete control over the military, manipulation of political institutions, and systematic repression of opposition. While some may argue that his regime brought relative stability, the cost in terms of human rights, social development, and democratic governance was immense. Stroessner's rule serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of authoritarianism and the importance of strong democratic institutions to prevent the excessive concentration of power in the hands of a single individual. His figure remains controversial in Paraguay. While some remember him for the relative order during his rule, the overwhelming majority recognize the severe injustices and systematic repression that characterized his governance. The subsequent transition to democracy reflects the challenges faced by countries seeking to overcome decades of authoritarian rule and build more just and equitable societies.